about. I'll kind of push us through because it's some stuff that is, it's one of those lightning rod things. I'm going to push us through it a little bit. We can talk for a little bit about it, but it's one of those, but it connects to the rest of our story all the way up to the Transfiguration. So I would like to get up to where we don't read the Transfiguration, but we get up to the Transfiguration. All right, so that's the beginning of 9. So I'm going to read the beginning of 7 and the next story after that. All right, so we're in Mark chapter 7. Yeah, Ed.
Mark, no. Where are we? That's the
we are in Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7. And remember, I have the NIV translation because that's my favorite translation. If you have the ESV or King James or anything like that, and it has a different wording than what I'm using, and that different wording is interesting, you could stop and point that out, because it's a good practice to read multiple different translations. But as I am, I don't know, how long have I been a pastor? 10 years. It'll be 10 years. In July, it'll be 10 years. I expect huge gifts from each one of you. Like that. That's in July. It'll be 10 years. So I have really grown to the ESV is still hard for me to read. So I like the NIV. So here we go. Chapter 7, beginning with the first verse. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of the disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. You see, the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, with hand sanitizer. And ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. Mark's kind of catching us up with why this is a hot take that Jesus is saying. So the Pharisees and the teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled, dirty hands? He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares what might have been used to help their father or mother is Corban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their own father and mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things just like that. Quick aside, they're talking about like your responsibilities to your parents, your responsibilities and all those things. It's like you have a responsibility to your parents, and yet you're declaring like, oh, I'm in service now, so I don't have to do that responsibility anymore. I don't know if the church tax exempt status has anything to do with that, but we'll keep on going. So again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside of a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles him. After he has left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. Are you so dull? He asked. Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile him? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their belly, into their stomach, and then out of their body. That's a poop joke that he's making there. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. And so he went on. What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within a person's heart that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lawlessness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. So what this section is talking about, we talked about this last week. I'm just catching everyone else up. What this section is talking about is the Pharisees have all these rules and regulations that are part of like cleanliness stuff. It's like let's say the pandemic lasted for 5 years. I'm sure that there would be traditions around like mask wearing and hand sanitizer that would then become bigger than just merely the hand sanitizer and all that stuff, right? Like that's the old style, old thing where they dip their fingers into water when they do communion, like priests and stuff. That's an example of that. Like that's to wash their hands beforehand. At some point, there will be like a holy hand sanitizer bottle up there, probably in the next 30 years, right? So that's kind of what he's talking about. He's like, these things, like, and you're being a hypocrite, right? You're supposed to watch your parents, but all of a sudden you become devoted to God and you're free from that responsibility. Like that's kind of what he's saying there. He's like, you guys are being ridiculous. And so then he starts talking about it's what comes out of your heart. You know, it's not about what you eat. It's not about what you poop. It's what comes out of your heart, right? And so the reason why I'm saying about poop, I read more about this in the last week. Apparently the theologians that talk about this talked extensively about Jesus talking about poop. And some groups, even some Christian groups, even said that your poop was clean. I don't know about all that, but I thought it was funny enough to mention. So yeah. So I don't know. That seems weird. Yeah, Fred.
Pastor?
Oh, Fred is talking. Okay, yeah.
But you wonder what
It seems like part of what he's doing is
sorry.
talking to a non-Jewish group as he's talking about all this.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So yeah, well, no, he's talking to Jewish groups through all this. So here, Fred was. I'm going to repeat what Fred says here in a second. What were you saying, Fred?
I wonder what Jesus would say about internet coming in.
Oh, the internet coming in. Yeah, like I think so. I think that's like internet or any kind of media. You know, anything that we allow ourselves to like come into us. I think that's. But like when that's coming in, you can see that it's coming out a certain way too. You know, like that's. And I think he's more concentrating on the things that are coming out of your heart, like the adultery, greed, malice, lewdness, and all that stuff. So that over there, I do think it's interesting that there's this whole section about all this stuff, and like there are a bunch of Christian sects that are really into controlling what you are watching and what you are doing, right? Like that's, and so I don't know. It's just a new branch of Pharisees, I think. So we have this whole thing, this whole section. So what Fred did I explain what Fred said to everyone? Fred was basically talking about like things like the internet coming in and maybe defiling you. What would Jesus say about that today? So that's kind of what he said. I got to get back into my back and forth again. So this next story is in direct understanding of what we just read is the next story, okay? So, and that has to do with what Cheryl just said, okay? Cheryl just mentioning the distinction between Jews and Gentiles. A Gentile woman comes up to Jesus now, okay? And let's see what Jesus says to her. So this is verse 24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. Weird stuff. Jesus never was like wanting anyone to know where he is. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit, I lost my place. Impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in the Syrian of Phoenicia. And she begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. And look at what Jesus says to her. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Who are the children? Who's he talking about? What'd you say, Gloria? The Jewish people. That's what he's talking about. That's who the children are, the children of God type of thing. Jesus is saying something that's kind of troubling, but we're starting to see what's going on here. So Jesus is saying, first let us feed the children, and you don't want to take anything from them. And then she says, Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So what is she saying then? She sees Jesus, what he is talking about. He's like, oh, okay, he's talking about the children of God, children of Israel type of thing there. She goes, I'm not part of that. So she calls herself a dog. And she's like, even the dogs eat the scraps that your children throw on the table, on the floor, all of that. And then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. And she went home and found her child lying in bed, and the demon was gone. Now think about what's going on. We're dealing with the pride of the Pharisees. But before even that, we're dealing with the pride of Herod. Remember that what we talked about even before Christmas, we're dealing with Herod killing John the Baptist and all that stuff. We're dealing with the pride there. And this woman who is a Gentile, suddenly she's like, well, the dogs get the scraps too. And so she humbles herself. And that's, I think, the point of this. And I think that's what we're seeing here is Jesus isn't mandating another set of laws and rules here. He's showing us that it's actually this way of our hearts being humble. And we continue seeing this with the very next little section. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre, went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. And he took him aside away from the crowd. Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears, and then he spit and touched the man's tongue, which is weird, but that's fine. And he looked up into heaven, and with a deep sigh, he said, Epiphatha, I don't know, something like that, which means be opened. At this, the man's ears were open, and his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, which is odd. Don't tell anybody. But the more he did so, the more people kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So whenever you see one of those healings where someone comes and gets healed, I think the gospel writers are going, they especially do it with the blind. They blind, and there's going to be another blind one here in a second. But the blind one, it's like, hey, this guy sees, do you see? And I think what they're doing now is this guy can hear. Do you hear? Do you hear what's going on? Do you hear what's going on? It's not about creating all these new rules about how to do all this stuff, but it's rather lowering, being a servant of all, being a servant of the people around you. That Gentile woman, she did not lift up in pride and be like, well, this is mine. You got to do it. I know you can do it. Right? It's interesting stuff. Interesting. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Pastor, one of my footnotes on verse 36, Jesus asked the people not to talk about this healing because he didn't want to be seen simply as a miracle worker.
Okay. Yeah.
He didn't want the people to miss his real message. We must not be concerned about what Jesus can do for us, but we forget to listen to his message.
So, doing a writer off of what you just said, Ed. I'm not saying that this is wrong behavior. This is more complex than being right or wrong, okay? But I do think it's very interesting that everything we do in the church needs to have like confetti and lights and like all this stuff. It's like, look at what we're doing, right? When we see Jesus usually going away and being away and doing good things, doing such good things that people can't help but talk about it, right? I think normally we're guilty of doing very little and talking a big game, and maybe we need to turn that down and turn it around, doing more and talking a little game, right? Something that I've been saying to people lately, I've believed this for a long time, but I think if you take care of the community will take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'm starting to say that more and more, and I think that's trying to position all this stuff. So yeah, so that's but yeah, going off on what you're talking about there, like it's backwards to how we normally think we should be doing things, right? Got to let everyone know. Got to yell it from the mountaintops. And I'm not sure Jesus did. And yet, salvation came from him, right? Yeah. Anything else? Am I kind of making sense?
Yeah.
No? Yes? Maybe?
Yeah.
Good. All right, let's continue on. So this, you look down at the bottom of it. Remember how we talked about hard stops in the Gospel of Mark versus Mark is just plowing through the story. You look at the beginning of chapter 8 and look at how it begins. During those days, another large crowd gathers. He's not stopping. He's not stopping. Like during is a continuation word, right? So during those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, remember, this is another big feeding. There was already one, not but 2 chapters before this, or 2 or 3 chapters before this. All right, so this is a different one. Okay, so Jesus called his disciples to him. I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 whole days. Important number. Remember that number. 3 whole days. And have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse along the way, because some of them have come from a long distance. And his disciples answered, but we are in this remote place. Can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. He said, 7. And he told the crowd to sit down on the ground. And when he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. And they did so. Not much is made of this, but what does that sound like? It sounds like this in the other one too, in the other big feast.
Communion.
Sounds like communion. Sounds a whole lot like communion. It's the same words. There's not enough mentioned about that because I don't think we want to connect this with communion, but I think the authors are. They're being subtle about it, but I think they are. So, so they had a few, see here, to distribute, and they did so. Verse 7, they had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present after he had sent them away. And he got into a boat with the disciples and went to the region of the Dalamathata. I don't know what that is. So before we read on there, and it's all connected. So there are a couple. What are the important things with this one? There's some important numbers. What are the important numbers?
Mm.
Three. What's the other? There's some other ones too.
7.
Seven. That's the other real important one. I don't know what to do with 4,000. I'm not quite sure what to do with that. But that's definitely there. But you got 3 and 7. Okay. So remember, this is all connected to what we were talking about earlier. Okay. So the Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. And why? To test him. And they asked him for a sign from heaven. He just fed people. He's just healed blind people, not blind people, deaf people. He's just, cast out a demon from this girl, right? But they want to see something again for themselves, right? And he sighed deeply. I read that as Jesus put his hand on his face, something like that, and said, "Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it." Have there been signs? Yeah, but they can't hear them and they can't see them. Okay? Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. And the disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for the one loaf that they had with them in the boat. And Jesus, probably still a little upset about the Pharisees, says, "Be careful," Jesus warned them. "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisee and that of Herod." So we're going all the way back now to Herod killing John the Baptist. Why did Herod kill John the Baptist? You guys remember? Yeah.
Somebody asked him to.
Pretty girl was dancing for him. Gloria just said, pretty girl was dancing for him. And he got a little hot under the collar and said, "I'll give you whatever you want." Right? So,
and her mom wanted John the Baptist's head.
Empty, feckless wants of the powerful is what killed John the Baptist. Right? And he's telling the disciples, watch out. And I think he's telling them, don't go after that route. You probably want to be more like the Syrophoenician woman who went as a servant. You see that? Who went as a servant over there. Remember, that blind man can hear all this and he can understand it. Can you hear it and understand? Watch out for the Pharisees because they're trying to trick us and all of that stuff. They're just trying to divide and conquer so that they can gain more power. And that's what Herod is doing too. Watch out for the whims of them. Don't get too involved in the powers of men, I think is what he's saying. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. And it's clever that he's saying yeast because they're all complaining about bread right there. They're probably, it says that they forgot. It was probably like Peter or somebody like that, that probably forgot the bread. And they're all like, "Come on, man. Like, can't you get it together? Like we got to go out here and eat and we're all going to be hungry." And Jesus is like, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees. And they discussed this with one another. And he said, is it because we have no bread? Aware of their, they discussed it with one another and they said, did he say that because we don't have any bread? And they probably got onto Peter or whoever all the more. And aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about not having bread? Do you not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened?" He's calling out what Mark is doing here in the gospel. Do you not see or understand? That guy that was deaf, he can understand now. The guys that we healed before that was blind, he can see now. Are you like them or not like them? Are your hearts hardened? Quoting Pharaoh, how his heart was hardened, right? Do you have eyes but fail to see, ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls did you pick up? They're like 12. And then when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls and pieces did you pick up? 7. Like that's, yeah. And he said to them, do you still not understand? Do you guys understand? Like what's, I think he's frustrated right here.
Yeah.
All that stuff. But like I think he's questioning, he's like, don't you see what the bigger thing is going on here? That number 12 is important to you guys. Look, there's 12 disciples. There are 12 tribes of Israel. And there just happens to be this amount of bread left over. Like, see you guys, like 7, like the 7 days of creation. 7 is a good, holy number and all those things. And there just happens to be 7 basketfuls left over. Like, see, like this isn't just happenstance. This isn't just happenstance, guys. Like, we'll be okay. And the very next story, here we go. Did anyone want to say anything? I've been talking a whole bunch. All right, we're going to their next story. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. We're getting a blind healing here. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spat on the man's eyes and he put his hands on him, Jesus asked, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see people, but they look like trees walking around. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were open and his sight was restored and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home saying, don't even go into the village. All right. Don't even go into the village. Again, don't say anything. So I've heard this healing talked about all the time. You guys have heard this before, right? Let's put this healing where Jesus heals a man and his vision isn't fine. He's able to see, but he's not able to see, right? That it's like, yeah, I can see, but everything looks like trees. So everything's messed up, right? His vision is still not good, not operating the way it should be. And then Jesus puts his hands on him again, and then he actually heals him. So I've heard this, and people talked about it like, oh man, does that mean that Jesus can't heal a guy, that he takes like 2 tries? It's like the defibrillator when you're watching ER back in the 90s, and he's like, oh, hit him again. All that stuff. Is that? No. What do you guys think is going on here? Why can he not see perfectly the first time?
His faith wasn't strong enough.
Faith wasn't strong enough. Yes, but think about everything we've just read. Think about the disciples and what is just going on. Why is his vision not perfect yet? And then
He could look but not see.
He could look but not see. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. I don't know if you're quite on it yet. Yeah, Fred. Maybe he needs more education. Maybe he needs more education. Yeah. Yeah. So Fred's saying that maybe he needs more education, like if you've never seen a person before and all that stuff. So he's like hacking into the Matrix and he's like learning Kung Fu or something like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Matrix before. So any other things? I have pretty strong feelings about this now. So like, I'm going to be pretty definitive in my answer.
So tell us.
Yeah. What?
So tell us.
I think he's the disciples. The disciples are getting it, but they're not getting it. They're beginning to see, but they're not seeing clearly. You see that? And so this guy suddenly this guy becomes almost like a parable. in his own healing, that he doesn't see things as clearly. I think he's just like the disciples, and I think he's a lot of times us too, where we see, we once were blind, and now we can see all the colors and the lights and all that stuff, but we don't see anything clearly, right? And that's just like the disciples in the boat complaining about not having bread after Jesus just did the miracle of the healing of the 4,000, right? And all these things. And to continue my point, we continue reading.
So is that like you get it in your mind, but it hasn't gotten to your heart yet?
That could be. Or it's like just, it's like when it's like a lot of things in life, where it's like all of a sudden you're aware of all of this, but you don't quite see how everything is working and all of that stuff. I think there's a lot of people that like God and Jesus and all that stuff. And it's about doing all these things. I better be righteous, or it's just all this stuff. So they see it, but they don't see it yet. So they're catching a glimpse of the vision. So I think the gospel clarifies this in the very next story. Jesus and his disciples, this is verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on to the village around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" It's one of my favorite stories right here. "Who do people say I am?" And they're like, "Well, some people say John the Baptist. Others say Elijah. Still others that you're one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he says. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus warned them, "Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody." Ooh, Peter can see. He can see, right? He can see like, oh yeah, I get it. Here we are, all that stuff. Then Jesus says this. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed. And after 3 days, ding, 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 3 days rise again. And he spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. And Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, and he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in the mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Peter can see. He knows Jesus is the Messiah, but all he sees is trees. All he sees is the humanity of what's going on. All he sees is how it brings power and glory to himself and the people around him. He doesn't actually see yet. He sees, but he doesn't see. See that? Do you guys see yet? That's awesome. It's such a cool story here. And so and then we continue on, and he called the crowd to him along with the disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me, for the gospel, will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes to the Father's glory with the angels." And he said to them, "Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see that the kingdom of God has come in power." By Jesus saying, "Take up your cross and follow me," I think what he's saying is, what Mark is saying and the way he's crafting his story is, be that Pharisee woman, that she's the example of righteousness. If you want to be righteous, follow her, Because when everything was on the line for her, she took up the cross and she called herself a dog. Like I think that's what Mark is saying there. Is it not? See that? Like, so that's he is coming, he's coming forward. He's like, be like her. Don't be like Herod. Don't seek the power of Herod. All that stuff. Like don't seek the power of the Pharisees. Don't do all that. Instead, take up your cross. Look like a lowly Gentile woman that's having to go beg to a foreign healer for her daughter to be healed. And you may actually see, you may see all this. All right, Fred, here we go.
So, all this to say that God sees things differently.
So Fred just said, so God sees things differently than you do.
Further,
Yeah.
maybe you better not expect for God to see things.
Oh, and Fred says, and so don't expect for God to see things strictly through human eyes like you do. Oh yeah. So he says, so what happens then is like God is telling me to do this and all these things, and I think, and yeah, and I think a lot of times going the way of God is going that way of the cross and being a servant. I think that's, and does that mean that I do that? Like that, like that's it's hard. And also, I'm being very hard on everyone right now. All right. Also, all the Gospels do this little trick that's kind of over the whole thing. All the Gospels do this. John does it to a certain point, but the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all do this. Right before Jesus goes into Jerusalem, they have the disciples asking the question, and we're going to get to that here in a couple weeks. They're getting to the point where the disciples are asking the question that we should be asking, because just today, we've set up a huge bar for ourselves. It's basically like, you got to take up the cross if you want to be saved. That's what you got to do. And it leaves the disciples asking, well, then who can be saved? Well, then who can be saved? And when the disciples ask that question, we should be asking that same question as we're reading the story. That's why these stories are brilliant, because they're crafted in order to get us to the point where we go, this is impossible. I can't do this. Then who can be saved, Jesus? And then right after that question is asked, Jesus walks into Jerusalem and he shows you who can be saved. It's brilliant writing. It's brilliant writing. We're getting to that point, but I felt like I was being a little hard on everything right now. And because we're reading this over weeks, and all that stuff. Yeah, Fred. Yeah, that's kind of what Martin Luther figured out. Like, that's my favorite thing. He says, isn't that what kind of Martin Luther figured out? That's one of my favorite things about Luther, is that he was constantly in confession, constantly in all this stuff, like constantly beating himself, and to the point where his priests are like, come on, dude, give it a rest. You're fine. And then something finally clicked where he realized it was grace. He realized the gravity of his sin, but he realized that God, took that over. I was talking to someone yesterday about, and they were very worried about doing everything at the end of their life right, like making sure last rites happen and all this in there. And the way this person was wording it to me was, I just want to make sure I do everything right, with the understanding of, like, I don't want to mess it up. And my heart breaks when people say stuff like that. because that's a burden on their soul about whether or not they're going to mess something up bad enough to where they end up in the bad place. You know, that somehow is what's gotten communicated over all the years of doing church and all that stuff. And I asked her, I said, if you didn't do that, would that action take Jesus off the cross? And she goes, no. Then how does it matter for your salvation?
What really matters is that we were baptized and we believe.
Yeah, so what I would say, Cheryl, was what really matters is that Jesus died and rose again. And if we think that our sinful actions are ever able to take Jesus off the cross, we have to think about our power in the world. And that we have no power to do that. And that he has died and he's already risen again, right? And she, when I worded it that to this person, like, you could just tell, like, the stress of the whole situation just fell off of them. So, and I think that's what we're supposed to get to as we get to the end of the Gospels. So we see it like, oh, Jesus is taking all of this. Jesus is taking all of this. And we're starting to see a picture of that here. So, I don't know. I really think, I love the Gospel of Mark here. I think it's fascinating. And I also love reading it the way we're reading it, where you see all these storylines that are being intermingled in there. Because when I was growing up, all I was ever taught was, well, here's this story. You know, Jesus wasn't able to heal someone on the first go. You know, that was what I was taught. Like, and then everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. It's about the disciples. It's about us. How we don't always see clearly. You know, we may see, but we don't see. You know, like that's, and that will adjust in our lives. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm seeing things pretty clearly, and then other times I'm not. I don't know. I don't know why that is, but it's important to remember the loaves and the fishes, and that God's got this. I don't know. So, any other things?
I just want to say, when you were talking about certain things happen and we don't know why, there's a little 4-letter thing that sometimes we use on our messages. It's GORK, G-O-R-K. God only really knows.
Yeah, God only really knows. We're actually, I can't remember what the exact phrase is. Remember last year we did a sermon series called Say What? We did it when we were still in complete lockdown. And it's like all these kind of Christianese phrases that we say, like, I think one of them was last time was, when you die, God gains another angel, and you know, things like that. One of them we're dealing with is actually dealing with a lot of what we're kind of talking about. Like, it's like, you know, what is happening with God and all that stuff. And so that's, we're doing that in the fall, into fall. So we'll be doing those then. But yeah, I mean, it's this whole section. I think it shows us that it's like, hey, God will see you through. It may not look as ideal as you ever think it is, but remember the bread, remember the loaves.
There's nothing wrong with me.
Remember the fish. Remember that Pharisee woman, and remember the cross. You'll be all right, and you'll be all right. So I don't know. Any other things? Because that's basically what I have for us today.
That's 6 more minutes.
All right. So furnaces, your health. What's going on with that? Anything new?
Nothing new, just had a wonderful visit with Vanderbilt last Thursday, and everything is progressing as it should.
Better than expected.
So Joanne has a cochlear implant now,
A
and
co-
she was able to hear what 60% or 70%.
Before the cochlear implant, it was 38% comprehension. They hoped it would get up into the 70s, and last Thursday she was at 80.
Very good.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes,
Yeah.
you understand.
The granddaughter, 18-year-old granddaughter with the brain tumor, went to the doctor in St. Louis last Friday. And after test, he's not sure it's a brain tumor. It may be a bundle of nerves that's causing pressure on the brain, which could be worse than a tumor. But he does feel like he can do surgery, and they're waiting now for that to be scheduled.
Well, good. I'm glad it's not cancer, but it's still a struggle.
Well, we don't know that.
Oh, we don't know that yet. Okay.
No.
90% of the cases are benign, yes.
But if it's not a tumor, it's nerves, they don't know what the ramifications are.
Okay. So we'll still keep her in our prayers.
Yeah.
Please.
Paige is her name.
And then Midge and Ed, your guys' health is going okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
After listening to everybody else's problems, ours are minor.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
We did get our first COVID shot last Friday.
Oh, you got your first COVID one last Friday.
Right.
I'm still looking to see how they had the 1As at 75 plus, and they haven't been able to get enough shots to give everybody. So
Yeah.
the smart people here says, oh, okay, we're going to make it 65 plus, and they can't get shots for them either.
I know Jack is on a waiting list through the VA. Is that what you're doing it through? Yeah. So Jack's doing the. Has anyone else gotten on a waiting list yet or anything? You guys are on a waiting list?
No.
Who knows? You're trying.
Only
You're on the
only our
computer, yeah.
age.
Yeah.
We have doctor's appointments actually tomorrow. So maybe we'll find out more then.
So I know here Piper and Vivian got shots. That's what's nice about being retired nurse, I guess. And so and you got a shot, Cheryl?
Yeah, I actually got a shot the day after I saw my cousin.
Oh,
Didn't know she was having trouble at the fire department in St. Lucie County.
okay. Well, that's good. So I heard the first one isn't too bad. I'm hearing the second one hits you a little harder. The second one hits you a little harder. And
That's
so,
what we heard.
yeah. So be prepared for that as you go forward and all that. And also, know everything's kind of normal until you get that second one. And I'm trying to listen right now of what that looks like for people as they start getting vaccinated and coming into church, because we got to make sure, because it becomes an optics thing, like if you're just coming in there without wearing a mask, you may make someone nervous. So that's something I probably have about 2 or 3 weeks left where I got to have a firm policy on all of that, just so people are comfortable around here and all of that. Yeah.
I lost the picture somehow.
Our animals.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Carol just said when her cousin got the shot that they said that it won't affect her and she won't be really spreading it long term, but she could still carry what she has on her, short term. And it's probably still good for her to wear the mask for a little bit. So we probably have to wait until we kind of get a good number of people, and then we can start, all of that stuff. So I'm still trying. I got my ears down to the ground. All my normal sources for all my knowledge during this whole thing aren't talking about this right now. And I think it's because they don't know. For those of you who don't know where my sources is, I found all my good sources for COVID information during this whole time has been Wall Street guys who aren't on TV. Like those guys, because they're greedy. You can put whatever words you want after that. And they are all about making sure they have the correct information. Now, not the guys on TV. Those guys are just TV stars. But the guys who aren't on TV.
So you're going with the ones that has all your money.
And he doesn't have any money off of me. He doesn't have any money off of me.
We gave blood last week and our antibody test came back positive. So even though it was July when we tested positive, we still have antibodies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
good to know.
we can
I
give
did look at
plasma
them on the
now.
screen.
So now we're waiting to find out how soon we can give plasma.
That's good to know. That's good to know. So that's good. And so you'll be guys. Are you guys planning on coming down yet? Or are you staying up?
No, we're planning on coming, but we've got to wait and see. We want to be here when the surgeries happen. So we've got to wait and see when that's going to happen. If it's put off a ways, then we'll come as soon as we have our second shot.
Yeah, I was gonna say the second shot, it depends on that too.
Yeah. Well, good deal. Good deal. As soon as I know any good information, I will dispense that. That's been my standard here through the whole time. But I'm glad people are starting to get the vaccine and all those things, because that's, man, when we can get that stuff out, that means the faster we can do all this stuff normally. So,
Right.
And so that's good stuff. But thanks for being here today, guys. May God bless and keep you all, that you would continue to open your eyes to the realities around you and how God is working. Remember the loaves and the fish. Amen. Have a great
Amen.
day.
Thanks.
Guys.
Thanks, Pastor.
Bye.